Hi, Annie.
Hello, Anne. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good.
Nice to have you back on Blogging Heads TV.
Yeah, I'm glad to
I'm
be.
Anne Althouse, and you're Annie Gottlieb.
Yes.
Let's see, what should we talk about? I thought we might talk about some of the candidates in this 2008 campaign we're dealing with.
We're deep in campaign mode. I mean, it almost feels like it's already 2008, doesn't it?
I think there was a piece in Time by William Crystal that said something like, if you actually see the campaign as starting at the point of the 2006 election, that we're halfway to the first primary.
Uh-huh.
So we're actually absolutely right in the middle of it, quite appropriately, in that view.
I guess. If you consider from the point of view of the permanent campaign, you know.
Which is apparently what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I've been going back and reading. I'm doing some project adding labels to all my old blog posts and going back to my first posts where I began in January 04. So I'm reading all the old things from the 04 campaign. You know, there are all these posts about 04, so I'm sort of mired in that nostalgia of all of that. But, you know, it's really
if you could call it that. What is negative nostalgia?
Yeah, some of it is sort of like, oh, that was so transient. I was writing about it every day, but what does it even matter? You know, there was stuff about Nader and, you know, and then I just feel like, well, geez, I've only been blogging for 3 years. It's very strange that I'm already immersed in this other writing about this new one. It seems like the old one just ended, obviously. That's the way we live now.
It is. I've sometimes said I wished we had 1 6-year presidential term so that they wouldn't be campaigning the minute they hit the ground.
But then every president would be a lame duck.
Right. There would have to be a provision for 1 additional 4-year term in time of, you know, with some huge senatorial majority or something, in case of war or crisis or somebody doing a really wonderful job. But anyway.
Like Giuliani tried to do after 9/11.
Yeah, right.
I wonder if that will be an issue. Anyway, but I want to talk about Hillary first.
Yes.
There are 2 new books that just came out about Hillary. I saw that there was a big article in the Washington Post today about these 2 books, kind of a good way to get up to speed. I obviously haven't read the books yet, but one of them is by Carl Bernstein, A Woman in Charge, The Life of Hillary Rodham Clinton by Carl Bernstein. That says she was terrified as a first lady that she was going to be prosecuted, and some other interest. And then another one called Her Way: The Hopes and Ambitions of Hillary Rodham Clinton, which tells the story. I don't think this is terribly believable, but I thought it was kind of fascinating, and maybe it's resonant, so it's sort of like fake but accurate kind of stuff, as they say in the world of Dan Rather, whatever, truthiness, that someone found a document in her drawer or something that was labeled, who writes these things out, but were labeled A Secret Pact of Ambition. That she and Bill had entered into a secret pact of ambition, not only entered into a secret pact of ambition, in which in 1992, where he would be president for 2 terms and then she would be president for 2, they agreed on all. Not only did they agree on all of this, but they put it in writing and they put at the top of the document, apparently, I'm not sure if I'm reading this quite right, but they called it the Secret Pact of Ambition and left it around where someone was able to find it and see it. I just think that's...
How secret is that? Right.
Is that at all believable that anyone would do that? But what do you think of that?
Unless they wanted to trumpet it to the world, and this was their way of, this was their sort of auto leak, you know, leaking themselves.
It when they can find it.
But, that's not believable to me, I don't think. I mean, if it was secret, you know, who would title it that, you know? You might title it 10-year plan or something like that.
It's like something a child would do.
Yeah.
Like, here's our secret clubhouse or something like that. Who would write that? I mean, it sounds like a naive person is making up a story, because I just can't believe they would have labeled it like that.
A naive person, or a sort of, you know, somebody with Clinton... what do they call it? Clinton derangement syndrome, you know, who thinks that these people are so nakedly ambitious that they would actually not even be embarrassed by doing something like that. You know, it's like the gloves are coming off already, and probably that's appropriate. I mean, it's going to be a really vicious campaign, because so much is at stake, and it is really going to be no holds barred, you know.
But there's this image of her that people have that kind of lends itself to all kinds of, you know, sort of tweaking people's fears and ideas. And you can say, oh, somebody says they saw a document that was a secret pact of ambition. And, you know, whether it's true or not, it just, you know, it just nudges people to keep believing what they already believe, or to believe it in a somewhat more worrisome way.
Paranoia, I mean, I really think, you know, most people are just going to go on believing what they believe, but presumably there's this central wedge of swing voters who can kind of and could go either way, and those are the people who could be tilted one way or another by some of this propaganda. I mean, none of it is particularly new. The details are a little more unsavory, I think. I mean, to hear about Bill's womanizing again in that much detail is really pretty stomach.
Yeah, that there was some woman who was sort of Marilyn Jo Jenkins, who was, according to, which one of the books is this? I think it's the second book.
Oh.
The one by Girth and Ben Natta, the Her Way.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is a takeoff on Kitty Kelly's Frank Sinatra title.
Oh, yeah.
His Way. You know, I did it my way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it said that Jenkins was spirited, this is quoting from the Washington Post article about the book.
Mm-hmm.
Jenkins was spirited into the governor's mansion at 5:15 a.m. On the night before he went to Washington to assume the presidency for a final furtive meeting. So, in other words, just before he went to go become president, at 5:15 a.m., she was brought in to whatever with him.
These are his priorities. These were his priorities. That was what was so appalling about Clinton, that he could be, getting a blowjob in the Oval Office while talking to somebody in Congress about Bosnia or something.
Don't we want a president that can multitask? I think that shows a certain amount of capacity to be president.
He can walk and chew gum at the same time,
we have to
or
deal
walk
with
and get his gum chewed at the same time.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah. You have to deal with these very intense, strong emotions while still competently running the world.
A good test, right?
I think having a blowjob while making big decisions would be a good. Maybe they ought to all be put through with kind of a trial by blowjob to. Is this going to be on Blogging Heads?
This is the kind of the acid test.
No, I think this would be good. It would test them to see if they could deal with it. Have them make a major decision, like maybe do some math problems or something like that. Or not math problems, but write an essay about foreign policy while getting a blowjob. And if they can, that would be more interesting than the debates. They could put that on cable, like pay-per-view.
The girl could be under the podium with all those podiums. Think of
what's going on behind those podiums.
Yeah, we don't know. Right.
Well, we could have some sort of I think that would be, do you think? So I think that the president can multitask that. But I'm surprised that more people aren't concerned about just the idea of Bill Clinton getting back into the White House, and the idea that someone who's already maxed out on his constitutional presidential terms gets back into the White House.
Yeah. That's
just so bizarre. I don't know why people aren't bothered by that more.
That it's sort of a sub rosa constitutional violation or something.
Yeah.
And
there's a reference to what it happened to Governor Wallace, George Wallace, back in the 60s, I guess it was, or was it the 70s, that he had maxed out on his governor terms.
And Lurleen became governor, right?
Lurleen, his wife, went ahead and became... And then I think there's something in the Washington Post article about how someone, I think it was Dick Morris, suggested that to Hillary Clinton, that that's what they were doing. Maybe another reference to the secret pact where he gets 2 terms and she gets 2 terms.
I just can't.
And she was very offended by that. Dick Morris had said to her, you only... you don't have an independent identity. You're like Lurleen Wallace.
First of all, I think a lot of Democrats are seriously nostalgic for the Clinton years and would be very happy to have him smuggled back into the White House. I don't think they're making any bones about that. But I think that's just a kind of a rump minority, and it is not enough to win the election. And I really think that your commenters today were sounding as if a Hillary presidency was inevitable, and I couldn't believe that.
Hey, you read my comments and I didn't. What did they say?
They were saying... we will have President Hillary. They kept using this sort of future, declarative, definitive tense. We will. They were fatalistic about it. I couldn't believe that. I thought, I can't imagine that she's going to be elected.
Well, what do you think of the fact that she voted against this new Iraq funding bill?
She and Obama.
She and Obama, who had, I think, not been clear about that. They keep changing their position, but it sort of seems to me that they both went through the calculation and figured they had to vote against it, and they both said sort of similarly kind of toned down things as they voted against the funding.
I wondered whether all of the Democrats weren't in on that, and whether it wasn't a deliberate strategy for the sort of rank and file to vote for funding the troops so that they wouldn't be left with that appearance of not caring about the troops, while the lead candidates could go ahead and say no to sort of suck up to the base. So that you think that
they're selfless enough that they're running interference?
I wonder, because the party wants to get back into power. They want to get the White House back, and maybe they decided to make that sacrifice play.
I thought the Democrats weren't that organized. I thought the whole thing about the Democrats was they couldn't do stuff like that.
Well, I wonder.
That's what the Republicans could do.
This made me wonder. Because
I think they've gotten
why just those
organized?
two? I think maybe they're getting organized. Maybe
What's
they
that
want
famous quote? Who said it? Will Rogers or somebody? We're going to talk about humor later, but the famous quote is, "I don't belong to any organized party. I'm a Democrat." That's one of the most
I think it was Will Rogers. Yeah.
Will Rogers.
Yeah. Well,
they actually get organized. I actually find that hard to believe that they could.
You don't think they could want something badly enough to momentarily get organized?
I think they want it badly, but they're not able to actually. I mean, it says something good about them, really, that they're not
lockstep,
coldly ambitious enough to just pull it together and do things.
Well, they're democratic in that sense. Democracy is chaos, you know. Yeah. So in that sense, they're closer to democracy than the Republicans, who do have those amazing phone trees and those amazing ability to.
Yeah, they merge into one large animal.
One large organism. Yeah. I'm going to sound like a Democrat if I say like slime molds. Because I just edited an article on slime molds, which are actually social amoebas, which when they start to starve, they get together into one organism. Tens of thousands of these single-celled creatures. They come together and they form a slug, and they move towards the source of light. And I'm going to sound like a Democrat.
Wait, they turn into an animal?
They turn into... A
plant can't turn into an animal, can it?
They are single-celled animals, but they merge into...
Wait, so a slime mold is an animal?
A slime mold is... an animal, yeah. It is not a fungus, it's an animal. It's a collective of a bunch of individuals who, when times get tough, they merge into one, they form a slug, that's what it's called, which moves towards light. And then it forms this sort of elegant fruiting body where a bunch of, and I'm probably thinking about this when I talk about this vote in the Senate, because I'm copy editing for Natural History Magazine, and I get all these great metaphors from it.
Yeah.
At a certain point, the slug reaches a good place, and it forms a fruiting body, which has a stalk and a spore sac on top. And the stalk cells die. They sacrifice themselves for the spore at the top. And the cells that are on the top are the ones that get to propagate themselves. And so there's all sorts of cheating involved, too. Because
so you need to write an elaborate political essay here.
On slime mold and Republicans.
So the Republicans are the slime mold, and the Democrats are just the mold before it turns into a slug?
The Democrats are just a bunch of amoebas, crawling off in all directions.
Yeah.
Sort of Brownian motion. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting.
They all sound pretty scary.
Well, what about the notion, though, now that you brought up, that the Republican field is much more volatile, the Democratic field?
That was from the William Crystal article in Time, where he says that there's one way in which the candidates in the two parties are kind of the same, in that they each has the top two, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for the Democrats, and Rudy Giuliani and John McCain for the Republicans. I'm quoting Crystal now. There's a third-place candidate on the edge of the first tier, John Edwards and Mitt Romney, and there's a big jump down to the next tier of declared candidates, none of whom seem to have much of a chance, and there's a possible late entry, Gore or Fred Thompson
Newt Gingrich,
who, if they got in, would join the first tier.
Yes.
So that's the way in which they're the same, but then they're different, he says, in that the Democratic campaign has been amazingly stable, that the percentages keep staying the same. The Republican race on the percentages has been more volatile. And they're also more differentiated on the issues, like the big issues like abortion and immigration. And, I think that what happened with the Iraq vote and Hillary and Obama is just another one of these places where they just keep lining up and being the same, and everything stays the same. So there's this lack of volatility.
And if I'm right about the vote, then the Democrats are becoming the slime molds, and the Republicans are becoming anarchic and chaotic.
Yeah.
And it seems as if each candidate has a piece of the desired conservative synthesis, but none of them has all of them, and all of them have negatives of one kind or another. I mean, the base...
What, you don't think Giuliani is ideal?
Well, he's, according to the article I read this morning in the Washington Post, I think, was it the Washington Post? I hope so. He's going to, no, it was the New Republic. He's going to do surprising...
Oh, yeah, that was, had a great caricature on the cover.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah. he's going to do surprisingly well in places like South Carolina because according to this article, which is by Thomas Edsall, the social conservative obsession with abortion and gay marriage is receding into the background. Mm-hmm. Not that it's changed that much, but that it's been upstaged by the Iraq War, the War on Terror, tax cuts, and managerial competence, something which everyone can agree on. Yeah. And so Giuliani's negatives may not be as negative as you'd think. Also, the old guard is dying out. Jerry Falwell.
The old guard is dying out, and I see a lot of comments from people, just like interacting with people on my blog, I see a lot of comments from people saying that they, they're willing to put up with the social liberal stuff of Giuliani to get the stuff they really care about, and rightly so for a president.
Yeah.
I think that must be really scary to people who want the Democrats to win. It's sort of like, hey, they weren't supposed to do that.
Right, that's right. Well, it would be a really good move in that respect.
Yeah.
To go for
I'd
Giuliani.
love to see that shake up. But that's the kind of volatility I think would just be really healthy for American politics to finally get over abortion.
Well, the trouble is, though, that a lot of the social conservatives may decide to stay home because they've pretty much declared that they're just not going to vote because when it comes right down to it, they've got heaven to look forward to. They don't need heaven on earth. And they can pull out of the political process at any time and not really feel that bad about it.
Well, if they only came in because they were so moved by the abortion issue, then it's only fair that they stay home and not vote for things they don't believe in. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they didn't believe in the whole package and they were just one-issue voters, they shouldn't be voting for
that and gay marriage. And, Rudy's gay friendliness, which I really like about him. That's one of the things I like about him. I discovered some things.
Yes, but he doesn't support gay marriage.
He doesn't support gay marriage. He just is comfortable with gays.
But I
civil
think
unions
probably. I think people can come together over that there's some people who are, didn't Edwards admit that he felt queasy around gay people or something like that?
I saw a reference. He did say something about that.
There was something about that. So I think a lot of people are willing to come in the middle and be tolerant of the idea that some people don't quite know what to make of gay people, and other people know plenty of gay people, and there's sort of an amorphous kind of a developing attitude about gay persons.
I saw
and
quoted.
People are just mellow about it right now, but they don't want to change any of the major policies like legalize gay marriage.
About 20% are absolutely adamant about it, sort of supposedly on religious grounds. I think that's kind of a front for a much more visceral revulsion. But I saw and I linked to a fascinating interview that Newt Gingrich did on that subject with a real Christian dominionist, somebody who believed that the government's only business is defense and justice, and that everything else really is God's business, and Caesar has a very small slice of the pie. But Gingrich was being questioned by this very hardline Christian right guy about the sinfulness of homosexuality. And Gingrich basically said, I believe it's sinful, but so aren't we all. And he got into a fight with this guy where Gingrich said, if you don't know any good kind, the guy was saying, isn't that a key to their character? Don't we care about their character? And Gingrich was saying, I think there are a lot of really good, compassionate people who are homosexuals.
And adulterers.
Not to mention, he didn't bring that up.
An adulterer can point to the sin.
Right. So he was basically saying to this hardliner, I think the guy said, do you think gays should be able to get married? And Gingrich said no. And then the guy said, do you think they should be teachers in government, in public schools? And Gingrich said yes. And the man was shocked. And Gingrich came out saying, if you don't know any good people who are gay people, you're leading a really narrow existence. At which point this guy said, narrow is the way to salvation, Mr. Gingrich. Broad is the
right? I mean, that's in the Gospels. Is the way is narrow.
Right.
So enter by the narrow gate. Right. That's right in the Gospels. So the word narrow is that's a buzzword for a Christian.
It was a buzzword. Gingrich fell right into it. But there were the two definitions of broad and narrow. And I mean, I guess those are the two ways you could swing too: broad or narrow.
Yeah.
That was too subtle.
but I do think that Christians are that the basic message is to be tolerant. Even if you view those people as sinners, there's always the love the sinner idea. I just don't think there are many people who are willing to just behave in a bigoted way in the social sphere, even if they think those people
I kind of disagree with you. I think there are a lot of those people who've really almost never known a gay person and don't want to, and want to maintain their notion that the whole thing is disgusting and somehow subhuman. I run into a lot of people like that who are.
But don't they think that the people that they know are all sinners in one way or another?
They
Certainly
do, but
they're adulterers all over the place.
They do, but homosexuality is in a different category. There is a
think
visceral revulsion against that in some people, and it may be one of the reasons why they're the kind of Christians they are. I mean, it may be a chicken and an egg question.
It doesn't seem like very good Christianity to me
It's
at
not.
all to have a feeling of loathing for other people because you regard them as sinners. It just seems completely obviously out of keeping with the scriptures. I don't see how people can, unless they're just unintelligent and really uneducated, how they can get into that position and think they're right.
There's a very good site called Experimental Theology, which I'll link to, which has a long series about sexuality and religion and where that revulsion is coming from. It's really good. But anyway,
but let's see. Did you? I was going to bring up, speaking of disgusting things, the bat mold and slime and feelings of revulsion. Let's talk about John McCain and what he said in a closed-door meeting to, I guess it was Senator Cornyn.
Yeah.
Got a lot of press. I mean, personally, I think it got a lot of press because somebody decided to get it out there to shake things up, and that they say things like that all the time. But apparently he said, if I may use the expression on Blogging Heads, and I think Bob said it was okay, that he said, fuck you, to Senator Cornyn. And
as Dick Cheney did once to Senator Leahy. Similar.
I think they all say it. I think they all say it behind the... I mean, I personally said in my post about it that I want a president that says, fuck you. I mean,
and it would be chicken shit not to.
Who is this? I mean, I think that maybe Mitt Romney doesn't because he has a big religious scruple against it, and that would be fine too. But you want someone who is strong enough to stand up to some really tough people, and I think anyone who, unless he's got some super strong religious scruple that keeps him from doing it, anyone who doesn't say those...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I just think anyone that doesn't say those words in private, in certain kinds of fights, really just doesn't have the balls to be president. Or whatever the female equivalent is.
I kind of agree with you. It tends to turn me on rather than off as a voter, when used in moderation and in appropriate contexts. But I think that McCain was probably on the defensive in that situation because he was being ragged for not showing up, for not being in the Senate, for running for president, and then coming in and sort of on the tail end of the issue and pronouncing on it. And I think he probably felt a certain defensive about that.
Well,
that's where it came from.
I mean, I was on one of these, I've been on a couple blogger phone calls with
you
McCain.
talked to him, didn't you?
I was on one with Giuliani, but I didn't get to the point where I got to ask the question. You have to punch in like *1 or something like that to indicate that you have a question to answer. You're on listen mode only. And then if you want to ask a question, you get into the queue by pressing *1 or something like that. And I just didn't do it quickly enough with Giuliani. But with McCain this last time, I actually was the first one to do it. I was first in line, which sort of was a little startled me.
Were you ready for that? Not quite.
I wasn't ready to be first, but I found myself first, and I wasn't happy with it. But I hope I was able to state my question well enough. Now, he does a little introductory statement. It was kind of funny because the introductory statement that he wanted to make his issue of the day was something about good government and how corruption is bad and we need to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money or some pablum of that sort. Like, let's fight about that. I object. What's to say? But he did preemptively try to cover the topic of what he said to Cornyn, and he said something like, well, the reports in the press were somewhat exaggerated, and behind closed doors, harsh things are said all the time, and, too bad YouTube, I think he was trying to sound kind of cool, and he said, too bad YouTube wasn't there to record it, because...
Which goes to show that he doesn't know how YouTube works, right?
Yeah, like he thinks YouTube, like it's a company that comes around like ABC News and films you as opposed to...
Not yet.
Why don't you just whip out your little camera phone and take it? You could put it up on YouTube. That would be lovely.
Right.
But so then I got the first question, and my question was, isn't it hard to run for president, especially against people who are not current sitting legislators, and to be dealing with a really complex issue about which there's lots of negotiations in the legislature.
And you're not there.
And to be out on the road. Yeah. I mean, there are two things, aren't they, in conflict? One is to be an effective senator and to be able to interact. I didn't put it quite this wordily, but and to interact with people who are there working hard on it and maybe a little resentful that you're away. And then the other is to be out on the campaign trail fighting against opponents who don't have current jobs,
right,
who can put all their time into it. Isn't that a problem? And he kind of, I felt like he got mad at me, you know, because
it is a touchy point. It's a sensitive point.
First of all, what can he say? But he acted like, oh, I thought I already answered that, but he didn't answer it.
No, from both points of view. I mean, he's not really doing his job as a senator because he's out on the road campaigning, and he's also at a disadvantage campaigning because he's still got to get back to the Senate and vote.
Right.
And you know, when Hillary and Obama's vote in the Senate makes you think about another aspect of that issue, and that is that they begin using their Senate votes as campaign tools.
Right.
And so their votes
Conflict
are no longer dispassionate, disinterested, and coming from where they really are or from where their constituents are. They're coming from political calculation.
Maybe this is why senators never win.
We might have, if we have, let's see, are there any senators running? Who's running on the Republican side who's a senator?
I don't know if anyone is doing very well is running.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we tend to pick the governors because they seem to have the executive experience, but I think they also lack.
They've sort of been like mini presidents in their own little.
Yeah. And I think Giuliani counts as the equivalent of a governor because
because New York counts as the equivalent of a separate planet.
Well,
almost.
And if you first of all, if it were a state, population-wise, it would be one of the largest states.
Yes.
I think if I look at the statistics right, it would be 12th.
No kidding.
The 12th largest state, so clearly bigger than Arkansas.
Yeah, and he did a very good job managerially.
And and it would be a state that was full of all these difficult urban problems and crime problems and so on. So I think it counts as the equivalent of a governor.
It's like a state of war, also. Yeah. I mean, it could also be considered a war zone.
Yeah, especially after 9/11.
Yes, and he did a very good job. The New Republic article that I linked to is full of statistics about the improvements that took place in the city on his watch.
Yeah.
Some of which began before he came in, and Dinkins didn't get any credit for them. They were part of national trends, like the decline in crime. But he definitely, it was his doing also. Yeah.
Well, I lived in New York for 10 years before he was mayor, and then I went back to visit after he was mayor. And
different
it physically looked different. Yeah. I mean, it looked great. It was really startling, actually.
It was definitely a renaissance. It also has led to New York becoming a real ghetto of the rich.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that he influenced that development as well, which is too bad because a lot of what made New York is dying out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to live in Greenwich Village.
Yeah, Greenwich Village.
$5 million condos.
Yeah.
One built in a church, in a former church, on my block. $5 million.
I went to NYU and I lived in Greenwich Village for about 5 years, and I guess I left in about 81. So that was a really interesting era. It was really so exciting. I had this feeling in New York that even though I was a student and I didn't have much money, I felt like I could just go out walking any day and there'd be stuff happening. There'd be stuff to see. I mean,
free entertainment.
It was like the street was an entertainment. And then I went back recently and I felt like it was like a movie set version of the old place. Everything was too perfect. You know, it was like Universal Studios Street or something.
And the roles are being played by Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, and they all live there.
Yeah,
part of the time.
I thought it was I enjoyed it, but I also felt kind of bad about it.
But you like Giuliani for president, right? Do you like him for president?
I love the idea of cutting into the old social conservative national security. I would like someone who was socially liberal and strong on national security from either party. I mean, if Hillary Clinton would like to do that, I would like to see her do it. I thought she might do that.
Yeah.
I think she might still do that. You know, I think Obama is more just not strong on national security. I mean, he brags about how he was always against the war. But I feel like, well, for him, what trouble was that? Of course he was always against the war. He's the kind of person who would naturally be against the war all along.
On the other hand, I don't think so, though. I don't agree with you
Really?
about that. I think you can find him talking a lot tougher than that. And I think he's saying what he has to say right now for the Democratic base. I think you'd find him much more much tougher and much more centrist if he became the candidate.
Well, I mean, I will give them a second shot. I mean, I'm a little annoyed at them today, but I'm willing to avert my eyes and watch them do what they have to do and then get their act together later. But, I mean, I still have to question their credibility.
Yeah. Well, Obama has been very active in trying to clean up the loose nukes in Russia, along with I think it's Hagel, one of the Republicans. And that's really important. It's dirty work. It's behind the scenes, but it's crucial. And he has also
Well, good.
said,
I didn't know he had any accomplishments. I thought he was all abstractions.
Well, I'm not sure that they've accomplished it, but they've been trying.
He needs a few accomplishments.
I will find and link to some of his tougher national security statements that he made really before he was winning.
Yeah.
When he was just, I think, actually running for the Senate, he sounded pretty tough on some issues. And I'll put a link in the sidebar to one of those because you need to hear him talking like that. Right now, I watched him when he spoke to George Stephanopoulos on This Week, maybe a week or two ago. When he started talking about getting out of Iraq, he would not look the camera in the eye. He stammered and he looked away in his eye, and I thought, he doesn't believe what he's saying. Now, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I really think
you mean it shows on his face when he's lying, because that's a real liability, isn't it?
It is a liability, but it's also, it's better than the blowjob test. If you can see when somebody lies, you're better, you have a better idea of what they really believe.
But he's not
now, maybe I'm giving him too much benefit of the doubt, and he really is a lefty peacenik, but I think he's
I thought he was a lefty peacenik.
I think he'll surprise you if he becomes the candidate. I think he'll surprise you.
I just think he's too green to pull it all together too soon. I mean, I think he could do those things, but maybe next time. I just feel like this is his first time out with all of this, our inspection of him, and I think that he's going to be a little too revealing. It's not.
I agree with you that he's too green.
Obviously, she is so. I mean, she's the extreme opposite. But,
she's gray.
Yeah.
She's autumnal, definitely, like me.
I want to talk about this varmint gun joke, but I also want to talk about whether Al Gore is going to come into the race. But let me bring the topics in the order that we were going to do it, because otherwise we'll never get back to the varmint gun joke. Okay. I wanted to talk about, in connection with, McCain's sort of nasty talk.
Why don't you explain that joke first, because the background of it.
Well, this was actually that same phone call, the one where I asked the question. Later, somebody else asked him. Well, there were a lot of questions about immigration. Obviously, immigration is a big issue. And someone asked him about Mitt Romney, what Mitt Romney would do, because he said, he's really locked in this battle with Mitt Romney, and it's kind of interesting because Giuliani is off to the side, not having to get his hands dirty, while those guys beat each other up over immigration.
Yeah.
Obviously, immigration is McCain's big issue right now. Whether that's going to go well or not, I think a lot's going to depend on that, and everybody's ready to get him.
Yeah.
But he came out with this great joke, but I only understood that it was a great joke after I got off the phone. He said, and this is a quote from McCain, maybe his solution, meaning Mitt Romney, maybe his solution will be to get out his small varmint gun and drive those Guatemalans off his lawn.
He didn't say shoot them, did he?
No, he didn't say shoot them, and I had to think about that later. It's sort of like, what is he saying? He's talking about shooting. Suddenly he's talking about guns and shooting people. That sounds just wacky.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of keep my wits about me, and I assume he's not wacky. That's I start with
Although I know people from Arizona who say he is. That should just go on the record.
Yeah, well, of course, one theory is that he's just wacky, but I was willing to, think he's not wacky, and that refers to something, and I thought he was just kind of lampooning the tough stance, that he's just kind of creating an image that is just sort of a comic character who really has no solution but is just posturing and acting tough. But then it turns out that the thing about the Guatemalans referred to you had to know 2 earlier news stories to get the joke. It's like when Jay Leno does jokes, he or Letterman, they start out with a line that's basically telling you what the news story is, and then they say the joke. So
this was a real in-joke for political junkies.
And I thought I seemed like a political junkie because I blog about politics all the time, but I didn't know either of the stories that you needed to know. One was that apparently it showed that some Guatemalans were, I don't know, among the employees of people who worked on his lawn or something like that. And then the other one was something about, he was trying to show his
macho gun-toting
gun guy.
Yeah.
and he said that he shot the small varmints, which is just, it was just kind of a weird thing to say, because who says varmints? And he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy. First, he didn't seem like that kind of guy that would use a gun, but then it really didn't seem like the kind of guy who, if he used a gun, and if he shot little things, that he would call them varmints.
Now, a lot of Mormons are obviously from Utah, from the West, and varmint is a kind of a Western expression. So I don't know if his family has Western roots. I don't know about that.
Michigan,
right. They never came from Utah, but maybe it's the desert culture from Utah spreading through Mormonism, and they talk like that.
Mormons say varmints?
Well, it could be, because so many of them are in Utah, and Westerners would say varmint.
Would they?
You know, a varmint is a pest, basically. It could be a coyote. It could be, anything that is sort of competing with your cows for the grass.
Yeah, it's the same word as vermin.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very Western. It's very much a Western movie kind of word. And it may be current in Mormonism because of the strong Utah contingent there.
Yeah, I don't know. So they spread their lingo around.
But anyway, that is a pretty good joke. I mean, it's a complicated.
I thought it was a great joke once I understood.
Complicated joke.
Well, what do you think of a joke that you can't understand unless you know a couple of news stories? Is that going to work?
Well, it makes people go look it up, I suppose, if they care.
Right, and then there's the theory that it works because you don't initially get it, but it gets your attention.
It gets your attention because it's like, what? What did he say?
And then the news stories have to write about it, and to write about it, they have to tell you about those two old stories, which, when told about, damage or on these. So it's sort of like, here are these stories you might not have noticed, I didn't, or you've forgotten.
And
now
how clever
we'll tell them to you again.
And how clever of McCain to put them all together.
Yeah. So
and on ad lib like that, on his toes.
Do you think it was ad lib?
Good question. Maybe it was pre-prepared.
Joke, but he pulled it off he sounded as if he were just
snatching it out of the air. Yeah.
I thought it was really quite. It's very striking. You remember it. You want to talk about it. You want to say what the hell is he talking about? And of course, there is the danger of saying, "What a nut." Isn't he nutty? He said that. No one understands that.
Well, Huckabee is making poor Huckabee.
Yeah, what was that Huckabee joke?
He could be one of the better candidates, but I think many things doom him. I mean, coming from Hope, Arkansas, for one thing, it's like we've had enough of that.
We can't do that again.
I mean, if they had the nerve, it would be a very good selling point. Give Hope a second chance, kind of thing.
The audacity.
It would be It would be a good slogan, and also I heart Huckabee, of course. But anyway, he made a joke, which was the only thing that got anybody's attention in the first Republican debate, including yours, which was about congressional spending being like John Edwards' haircut bill or something like that.
Well, let me give you the exact quote, because I think there's a little homophobic edge to it.
Oh.
We've had a Congress that spent money like John Edwards at a beauty shop.
Beauty shop. Okay. You're right. So there's a little bit of that.
Think a little homophobia in that?
The word, I'm associating the word fag with Edwards, and I don't remember why, whether it was somebody said it about him, somebody earlier associated Edwards with the word fag.
Well, I said
it was Ann Coulter. It was Ann Coulter.
Oh, right. What did she say?
Remember? She said something about, I don't remember, unfortunately. But she said she used the word fag in relation to John Edwards.
Oh, she called him one, I think.
She kind of pretty much called him one, yeah.
I think that there is it's sort of like there's
She all but called him one.
It's like the thing about Hillary being the cold, calculating bitch, It's sort of like there's this thing that we want you to think. We can't quite come out and say, hey, why don't you think of her as a cold, calculating bitch? Or why don't you think John Edwards as a,
I see what I get from John Edwards is the slimy lawyer vibe. I don't get the, any gay vibe at all. Hair and all. I just get this smarmy, unctuous lawyer thing from him, which I don't like at all.
Well, that might merge with like a bigoted idea of gay people, that there's something sort of...
like thinking of Roy Cohn or something.
Yeah.
But anyway...
Sort of unhealthy, lawyer, slimy, kind of... perverse and ill, there's a whole kind of set of ideas that can be clustered around an image of a gay person.
Commie, pinko, trial lawyer.
That's kind of a stretch.
You're having to stretch to put those two together. But Huckabee now is making hay with this joke in a really embarrassing way. I mean, it was a decent joke, but he's now said, he's got a newsletter going out saying, hey, I made a good joke, and it got me a lot of attention, and now I'm, it's like, oh, please.
But everybody has been talking about the haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, the haircut, I mean, it's sort of, he connected two things, and it's sort of like he brought in the thing about Edwards out of left field to reinforce the stereotype.
Well, and Edwards is populism also. You know, he's come under fire for having that huge house, and here he is talking about equalizing, economic injustice and the poor, and and there he is getting $400 haircuts.
And then the thing this week was he got paid $55,000 to give a speech about poverty at some university.
Give a speech about poverty.
Oh, yeah, they keep collecting additional things that reinforce this stereotype.
And he's not donating his honorarium to some good cause, I take it.
I don't know, he should.
Maybe he... But there's... Giuliani gets $100,000 a speech. This is something that was in the New Republic article.
I saw that in the article. Yeah.
Right. The New Republic article had a little bit of a populist edge to it, a hostility toward Giuliani.
And it listed all of his fancy requirements about the hotel room and the
private
plane. He specified the private. Not just he had to have a private jet, but which kind of private jet he
must be a Gulfstream 6 or larger, or maybe it was a Gulfstream 4.
None of these second-rate private jets for me.
Right, and I thought that was a little gross, but it connects to the Thomas Frank "what's the matter with Kansas" idea. Why are white working class people supporting this man? Going against their own economic class, and the answer really is that they believe that he's one of them who made good, and if they made good, they want the best Gulfstream too.
Yeah.
This notion that Republicans admire the rich because they think they could become them if they worked hard enough, and Democrats admire the poor, for being authentic and
But poor people want to. I mean, it's sort of like during the Depression, people went to those Hollywood movies that showed this like idealized, glamorous life of people dancing around in ballrooms and evening gowns and all this stuff.
Busby Berkeley Blitz.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there some idea that if you're poor, you don't want to watch people being... This is like the punchline of the movie Sullivan's Travels, right? The people, it's kind of an escape or like a dream out there that you could say, I could be rich too. Or, I mean, even if you don't think you'd be rich, you could be rich.
It's like playing the lottery.
Yeah.
It's like playing the lottery, which is why, I mean, Thomas Frank wrote a whole book about why do these Republican voters who used to be Reagan Democrats, and they were Reagan Democrats who switched to Republican Party under Reagan, why don't they vote their economic interests? And the answer was because they don't identify with other people of their own class.
And
they identify with the rich, who they would like to be.
But the poor people aren't their class either. I mean, most people see themselves as in the middle. Now, if you're going to identify, which side should you identify? Should you identify toward people poorer than you and want government programs that help those people, or should you identify with people richer than you and want government programs that help the people richer than you? I think that there's something pragmatic about identifying with the people richer than you.
Yeah, and that's working poor on the one hand and lower middle class on the other, and small business people. Yeah.
I mean, I think middle class people just think programs for the poor are going to take money away from them and are going to depress the economy and things.
Also,
like
anybody with a work ethic.
Yeah.
I mean, people who are rich have done a very good job of selling themselves as people who are rich because they worked hard. And in many cases that's true, and in some cases it's not.
Yeah.
In some cases they inherited money and their money worked hard, and they hired good people to manage it.
Yeah, we haven't been hearing much wrangling over the death tax lately. I wonder why that went away, but that kind of tapped into that whole thing, right?
Right.
Where people shouldn't be able to inherit their wealth, and then the fight back against that was, well, I have a small business that I'm passing on to my children, and it's worth a lot of money, and things like that. So.
But the Democratic rich do identify with the poor, and the Republican poor identify with the rich. I think that's interesting. Very interesting.
Like Edwards.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
rich person identifying with the poor.
And my family, a lot of people in my family think he's the greatest, and I can't stand him.
I voted for him in the primary in 2004.
Really?
Yeah. And I then went on to vote for George Bush, but during the primary, when I was looking for someone I could vote for on the Democratic side and assumed I would vote for a Democrat, I preferred him over Kerry just because I didn't like Kerry, and he was the last guy standing who could
possibly beat Kerry
back. Now, wasn't I right about that?
Yeah, Kerry was worse than him.
He was a terrible candidate.
I mean,
hey, speaking of old candidates for president, what about Al Gore? He's in the news this week with a new book. He says he's not coming into the race, but as he comes forward with his new book, that's what everyone wants to talk about. Are you really going to run for president? And he's acting kind of coy and stuff like that.
He almost kind of has a chance because the environmental tsunami is so overwhelming right now. I mean, that is just, it's jumped the shark. It's a meme whose time is, that's really peaked.
Yeah,
and he could ride that. He could ride that wave, I think.
I quoted something. Oh, Maureen Dowd had a nice column this week where she quoted Donna Brazile. You know Donna Brazile?
Yeah, sure.
She had said, if he drops 25 to 30 pounds, he's running. So there was a whole issue about, oh, he's so fat, how can he run for president if he's that fat?
Well, remember when Tipper was fat and he gave her a passionate kiss and she was kind of chubby?
Well, a lot of Americans are fat.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's an issue that, if he's made environmentalism his central issue, and then he's really fat, he's like obviously over-consuming. He's badgering us to cut back. But meanwhile, he's obviously, I mean, how many fossil fuels, if you eat twice as much as you should, isn't that worse than using incandescent light bulbs or something?
Your carbon and your avoirdupois footprint both become heavier.
Because the food has to be raised and trucked to your mouth. And
it's just another one of those blind spots that those people have. You know, I mean, his tour consumes enormous amounts of energy, obviously.
Right,
so
right.
That hypocrisy has already been exposed, and endless. I think you have a blind spot when you talk about how, it's so much better to read newspapers online.
Yeah.
Well, reading online is using energy. It's using electricity, and it's.
Yeah, but when I read the newspaper, I also have the computer open, so I'm doing both at the same time.
So you're.
But look at all the paper. I mean, you get all of this paper, and it's trucked to your house, and the ink has to be manufactured, the paper has to be manufactured. But the main reason I wrote about that was, if you read these articles, like there was a big article in the New Republic that had a list of all the things you could do, little things you could do, like change to compact. Everybody's with the compact fluorescent bulbs, and they never say get rid of your print subscriptions and just read online. And also, you need a bright light to read, especially as you get older. Yeah. You need a bright light to read, and so I really do think that,
I have discovered that.
And you throw out so much that you don't read. I mean, I never get the local paper because it's so full of junk.
Yeah. But I don't know that anybody's done a calculation of how much energy is consumed by having your computer on and having all of your gizmos on. And,
well, I'm waiting to read that article.
And then there's the lifetime cost of, extracting the materials to go into a computer and disposing of the battery in landfills and all of that. Somebody did a calculation like that for the hybrid car and the Hummer came out actually having a lower net environmental cost.
Yeah, people always look, it's like a lawyer's brief. They take the facts and they marshal the facts that make their argument, and there's always another side of it. Like with recycling, I don't understand why recycling paper is good for the environment. Why isn't the ideal to take all the paper and bury it, and then that's the carbon sequestering?
Carbon sequestering, or possibly it makes good mulch and turns into fertilizer.
But then it releases the carbon. I mean, shouldn't the idea be grow a lot of trees or whatever, bamboo, whatever you're making the paper or products out of, and then when you're done with them, put them back in the ground. And don't let them don't let them decay into the air.
Maybe they'll become oil once again.
Put them there long enough, and then we can get them. But then when you burn them, they will release the. But it's sort of like, don't you want to get ahead with more plants that then don't decay or don't burn somewhere?
Well,
so it seems to me you should try to be growing more new things and then turning them out. Isn't that the better answer?
Have you heard anything new about that guy who's living the low-impact life in Manhattan? I have not been reading his blog.
I hope he's suffering, though.
Yeah. His wife is going to leave him, I think.
Have we heard any news of this?
But anyway, to go back to Al Gore and losing weight,
that's
an interesting observation. The whole business about appearance in presidential candidates is interesting. I mean,
Huckabee's all about his weight. Isn't that his big issue? He lost weight.
Huckabee's he lost weight, and if he can do it, you can too. He's like a male Oprah.
Yeah.
And there's also, Richardson is kind of pudgy. He does not look, he's not your square-jawed. I mean, Mitt Romney, obviously, is like a movie president. And, John McCain John McCain looks like the older Charlie Chaplin, though. Have you ever noticed that about him?
He does,
He really, there's a strong resemblance there.
So maybe the humor is striking chord.
Yeah. I like McCain. I've had people from Arizona tell me that he's crazy and he's a lunatic, and I I feel like I should have learned from Jimmy Carter that listen to the people from a guy's state because they know him better than anybody else does. Familiarity breeds contempt. They do not have illusions about the candidate. And so I realized that I ought to be listening to people from Arizona.
So I should be talking about Tommy Thompson then.
Yeah, you should. Yeah. But I'm not sure, since the people I heard it from were Democrats, I'm not sure, but there may not, have been a distorting factor in there somewhere. So I'd like to hear from an Arizona Republican, the skinny about John McCain, the real deal.
Well, I wanted to bring up on this subject of the fluorescent lights, this whole topic. You were writing about it this week. This whole thing about nature and artifice. Let me just say that my hatred of the fluorescent lights is just I feel like I'm sensitive to the way things look, or I just feel that people who think the bulbs are just great don't have the same perceptions that I have, or don't notice
your visual
aesthetic perceptions. They don't see the difference in the light. They don't see how things look. It's very upsetting to a lot of people to have to use fluorescent lights, and the idea of forcing people, not depriving
There goes my telephone.
Uh-oh. Well, just ignore it.
I didn't get it far enough away from this. I hope it's not going to totally screw the thing up.
I can't hear it.
Okay. Well, it's not that. It's that they told me not to have a singular cell phone anywhere near this.
Oh, but that doesn't have to do with whether it goes off or not.
Okay.
It sends out as a periodic signal, and it creates a kind of a buzz.
Oh, dear.
That's the
All
problem.
right. Well, fine. Okay, they can cut that little bit
a singular
out.
signal. It's not the ring. But I have a problem with people selecting for environmentalism, picking the thing that they don't care about, and then trying to make it mandatory.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, well, it's easy for me. I mean, I could say, you should never go on vacation because I don't feel like going on vacation. Why don't you stop flying all over the world?
Right.
Why don't you? Or someone was saying, cooking a 12-pound turkey once is way more energy than is saved by using compact fluorescents all year. And it's sort of like, okay, let's end the turkey on Thanksgiving. Let's switch Thanksgiving into everybody fasts.
Yeah.
And then that's for the environment. Why don't we do that? Well, it's sort of like, well, that's a nice idea because that appeals to me because I don't want a turkey on Thanksgiving anyway.
Or I'm a vegetarian and I make vegetarian Thanksgiving.
Everybody picks the things. Here are the things not only you should do, but do this one. And then there are all these other things that I don't even want to talk about.
We don't have the notion of sacrifice at all. I mean, we don't sacrifice.
But I thought
the point of sacrifice is for Lent, for example, is giving up something that you like.
Well, you could create a culture of sacrifice and ask people to give up something that would hurt. That would be one way to do it. But what I don't like is asking people to give up something that would hurt them and wouldn't hurt you. That's what's the worst thing, right?
Right.
But I thought Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, I think it ends with a list of a lot of things, and it's actually presented in a pretty mellow, moderate way. It's not, you have to do all of these things. If we did all of those things, it would hurt the economy.
It's like pick a couple of things from this list that you can live with.
Pick some that are easy for you to do. So don't make anything mandatory, but give us a big list with a lot of ideas, and pick the ones that are completely easy for you to do.
And that will make your little contribution without too much pain, which is how Americans do things.
Yeah.
We're not masochists. We're not into asceticism or...
Yeah, we want to have fun. I mean, some of the things might be more, better. But
do you think if Al Gore, do you think if he gets into the race, he will sweep to the front of the field and give Hillary a run for her money?
I think it'd be really weird.
Or do you think he's is he pre-chewed because he's already been and lost once? Does that?
But he went away long enough, and he's got this special thing of losing while winning.
Right.
So that's better than Kerry coming back, for example.
It's a wildly unpredictable race, isn't it? But anyway,
it'd be interesting for him to come back. But I do think he should lose some weight, or people are just going to talk about how fat he is all the time. Or do you think someone fat could use it to their advantage? I mean, someone was saying something about how... Maureen Dowd was talking about this, how, millions of Americans are fat, and they could, you could come there and just be fat and be good fat.
Yeah.
Find a way to be good fat.
I think it depends on how you look fat, I don't think he looks very good fat. I think there are people who look like they should be fat, and it's right for them to be fat, and he's not one of them.
Yeah, Clinton was kind of good fat,
but
he wasn't that fat.
Yes, Clinton looks good. Clinton is a good fat guy.
Yeah.
He's chubby. He's got his little lower lip gets plumper and everything else. And but Gore looks like Robert De Niro in Raging Bull when he put on 60 pounds.
Yeah.
He just looks bloated.
Well, that may indicate that he's not meant to be that fat, and he could find it easier to lose weight. Maybe. But Maureen Dowd was saying how James Traub of the New York Times Magazine followed the ex-president around and said he was eating like a maniac. I watched him inhale the clam dip at a reception like a man who doesn't know when his next meal will be. So then maybe that means he just isn't running. He just doesn't care. He's letting himself go. Hey, letting himself go. You were writing about that the other day. This is going to segue us to the next topic. You had a nice essay on your blog about how at a certain age you kind of make a decision whether you're going to... You can't just be natural. So
nature doesn't do it for you anymore. Nature is your beautician when you're young because she wants you to reproduce. But when you get older, it's entirely up to you. Whether
you said nature is trying to kill us.
Nature is trying to kill us, yeah. This was my insight about 9 years ago when I was giving up youth, which was like late 40s, early 50s.
So you were saying that it was like you have to make a choice between whether you want to fight nature or let yourself go.
I had been a nature worshiper when I was young. I mean, in that sense, I was a typical, hippie wannabe.
Yeah.
I had the Mother Earth news stacked up in my apartment in Manhattan. It was idiotic. I never even read. All I would do
What did you wear? Did you wear like these flowing print dresses and
I
stuff?
did. I had some of those sacks, those Indian print sacks, and those long strings of seed beads, Drawers full of seed beads. I remember when I got robbed, back in the great 70s when New York was a dangerous, wild and woolly wild frontier. I would come home and find, my door open and the seed beads all over the place. And the robber was obviously really pissed off because didn't find anything made of gold or anything like that.
Yeah, your jewels were all seeds.
It was all this sort of crummy hippie stuff. But, I was kind of a nature worshiper, and I thought,
But you were living in New York, so like that low flow, whatever that guy is.
Exactly, right. I mean, I was not living an ecological. I just like to go out to Santa Fe and fantasize about how, if I had any guts, I'd pull up stakes and go out there because I love the desert so much.
Yeah, when I was in college, I had the feeling that that's what the good people do. They'd go back to the land. Like, what's your aspiration? Like, the only thing I could think of was to be on a commune and be a subsistence farmer.
Yeah.
Like, it had nothing to do with anything I was interested in or anything I could possibly do.
Yeah.
But I definitely got the message from the culture that that's what the good people were doing.
And they came running back, most of them. I mean, some of them stuck it out and became real farmers and lost their sentimentality about nature, but stuck it out anyway. But most of them just came running back and, came back and put nice screensavers on their computers, and that was it, pretty mountain views or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, it's like you have this love affair with nature, and then nature betrays you when you get older. And you suddenly realize that nature was never your friend. She was just trying to con you into, carrying on the species. And
well, you could be fatalistic about it. You could embrace nature and say, now what nature wants me to do is to basically go along with the natural program and die.
Well, that's what Ronnie Bennett said. She didn't say go along and die, but go along and enjoy the pleasures that are particular to this age.
Yeah.
And I've come around to that now that it's, a lost battle, but I was still fighting, 9 years ago or so. That's why I wrote that. But it reminded me of your post about the pill that women could now take to stop their periods.
Yeah, it got approved by the FDA this week.
It got approved by the FDA, which is astounding because I can't imagine that they really know what the side effects of this are going to be over
Well, some people are
years.
saying it's really basically the birth control pill just taken without the gap.
Aha, yeah.
So, the idea that you don't take it for 7 days or something like that, it's just a different way of taking the same thing, so we actually do have a long background of... but we don't have a background of not having our periods. So
but we do, because I've also read that, in prehistoric times, women were pregnant most of the time, and so they really didn't have very many periods. And that the number of periods that we have, the number of cycles that we have, is really abnormal, and that might be
so that's the real experiment,
making us have more cancer because we ovulate more often.
Yeah.
And these theorists were saying that suppressing ovulation maybe is not a bad thing.
It's more back to nature. It's more natural than having birth control and not getting pregnant all the time.
Pregnant 18 times and losing 15 of them is what was natural at certain times, at least.
Yeah, but all that pregnancy naturalness, I think, involved a lot of death. Speaking of nature trying to kill us, I mean, the whole arrangement is a plot against women's lives, isn't it?
But I did realize that at a certain age you realize that, you now have to watch out for lumps here and bumps there, and, you really have to do all this stuff that involves high technology. Mm-hmm. And how, when you were young you might have scorned the hair clipper, and now you have to, have a colonoscopy, So technology...
I think that could kill you too, though.
I don't know about that. I think it's well, we won't get into that.
Yeah, I could tell you stories. I think you can get killed.
People who get perforated by the...
Absolutely.
Oh, no, God.
Did they tell you about that? They say
No.
they go in there and they'll pull off these polyps, which might well be benign, but did
Yeah.
they tell you that in doing that they might perforate your colon
They
and you would
did
die
not.
in the next few weeks?
That was not on the consent form that I signed when
Well,
I did.
I happen to know that can happen, but
You know
I don't
somebody
want to.
it happened to?
I mean, I don't want to discourage people from getting something that might save their lives, but find out they might be telling you only part of the story.
Well, you want to go to somebody who's really good and experienced,
Yeah.
with someone with a nice touch.
Yeah.
But would you? I mean, if you could have not had your period ever, or rarely, would you have gone for that?
Yeah.
You
I mean,
would've?
it's such a ridiculous inconvenience. I mean, do you remember when you first found out when you were a kid and someone told you this is going to be what your life is going to be like? It's like, you must be kidding me. It's absurd. What a horrible thing to have to tell a young girl.
It's like a conversation
You've
I had
gotta
with
be
my
kidding me.
conversation I had with my brother about shaving, where I said to him, "Ooh, you guys, you got hair pushing out of your face every day. Yuck!" And he looks at me and says, "Yeah, but you bleed every month." And I thought, he's got a point.
I mean, I remember how I felt when I was first told about that. It was,
You
it's
were
just
horrified?
absolutely outrageous. It's
All
so
I can-
unfair. I mean, it's natural, so you can't say, oh, this is discriminating against me. But
Yeah.
nature is discriminating against us.
Yeah, I don't remember ever. I don't even remember the first time I heard about it. What I remember is being on a train to California and being maybe 9 years old and seeing an ad for sanitary napkins and asking my mother, "What are those?"
Was it
What's
modest
a sanitary napkin?
because?
What?
Was it modest because?
Probably.
Like a woman in an evening gown. Remember those old ads?
Yes.
It's just a woman in an evening
Yeah.
gown, and the whole ad is modest. ... Because.
But I remember the words sanitary napkins. That was what got my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Modest because, I wasn't inquisitive enough to wonder about that. But the word sanitary napkins was there. And I'm like, napkins I get, but sanitary napkins? What's that?
Yeah,
And
it's
I
like,
asked
you mean
my
these
mother.
napkins we've been using at dinner
Right.
are unsanitary?
Full of germs. I asked my mother, "What's that?" And apparently she told me. I do not remember her answer.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I remember is reading her diary that she had saved from when she was like
Ah.
12 or 13, and saying, "Prayed for the curse last night." She really wanted to get her period because that would mean that she was a
She knew
woman.
she wasn't.
And that completely conditioned my expectations.
I thought it was
cool.
yeah.
I want this because it will mean that I'm a woman. And I was also enough of a nature mystic so that I thought it was, very primal and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I wound up getting it very late, so by the time I got it, I was worried that I
Well,
never
did you ever
would,
get
and there was
into
something
this
wrong
like
with me.
feminist stuff that involved sort of worshiping women's periods and things like that, or any of these artistic things like performance art?
Painting with your blood, or
I have an old post about a performance artist who
Carolee Schneemann.
she did a thing where she did it when she was at her heaviest flow, and she wore no tampon or anything like that, and she was wearing these white clothes, and as she went through it was like all, in front of the audience.
Yeah, it was like Jackson Pollock, but female.
That took nerve.
It may have been Carolee Schneemann who also would pull written scrolls out of her vagina.
Hey, I saw something like that on Howard Stern the other day.
You did?
It was not too
You
feminist.
saw something like that?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
you-
actually subscribed to Howard TV on the video on demand on my cable service, and I think it was partly a kind of a protest against all of this anti-shock jock stuff. I wanted to, see what was going on and hear a little more loose talk. I get tired of all of this prissy puritanical stuff.
Yeah. The asterisks do get a little
But they were
tiresome.
pulling all kinds of things out of this. It was actually. Well, I won't go into it.
All right, you better not.
The whole thing of pulling things out of a woman is kind of gross,
Ooh,
but it can be done in a sort of a feminist performance art kind of a mode.
That's how Carolee did it.
Yeah.
I actually did one issue of a women's literary magazine when I was young, and it was called Elima, which was some sort of, initiation rite for girls who are getting their first period. That was the title of it, so obviously I was into this. And but there was some pretty good writing in it, including some journals of Carolee Schneemann, so I knew her. But the things that I picked were not about her performance art. They were more memories about growing up as a girl and wanting to be an artist. And she thought Cézanne was a woman, and so she made Cézanne.
Oh, because of the ad.
Yeah, she made Cézanne her patron saint.
Oh.
artist, and so there was some pretty nice stuff there.
Hey, speaking about art, and just looking at the time, I was going to drag up our last topic and say a little something about The Sopranos, which I think we both like a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot we could say about it, and we both kind of think it's great art.
It's the Shakespeare of our time.
Yeah,
definitely.
You said it was the Shakespeare of our time.
Yeah.
I thought there's a whole thing on that about using drugs. AJ is on antidepressants now. And
these guys who are dumping asbestos are saying
don't do any
chemical imbalance.
Don't do any spoilers, because some people wait for this DVD, so I don't want them to leave.
Okay.
So be careful.
All
Don't
right.
reveal any plot elements. Am I losing you?
No, I just put my hands over my mouth. Like
AJ, I don't think it's enough of a spoiler to say that AJ is on antidepressant drugs.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a lot of talk about, toxins and drugs. There's some stuff about asbestos. I don't think that's too bad of a spoiler.
Right.
And a certain amount of talk about whether it's all a chemical imbalance. I think Silvio says that at one point. So it's sort of like, do we have souls? Is there real morality? Or is it all just the chemistry of the brain?
Is the human condition reducible to a chemical imbalance?
Yeah, this is sort of like the nature artifice thing, in which the soul is the artifice. It's sort of, is there something that we make of ourselves that we're personally responsible for? Or is it all just nature and some kind of chemical structure that we might as well just tweak and vary with the right chemicals, and so we can be good little people?
Well, that's supposedly part of the left-right divide right now. People on the left are materialists, philosophical materialists.
People on the right want you to take responsibility for yourself.
And that people on the right believe also that there's a spiritual dimension that's real, and that it's not just some epiphenomenon of chemicals in the brain.
You know, even if that's wrong, isn't it better to believe that?
I'd rather believe that, and I think,
It makes life better, and it increases the chances that people will behave well.
Yeah.
It's to let people off the hook and say, oh, it's just my chemistry. You didn't give me the right drugs, so it's your fault.
It's a lot more dignified to think that, that there is a me who has a choice.
Yeah.
And in fact, I worked on a book with a guy named Jeffrey Schwartz, who's a neuropsychiatrist, who pretty much proved with obsessive-compulsive disorder that you can control your own brain. Which means if you can control your own brain, then you can't actually be limited to your brain. It's almost it's an impossibility. It's a logical impossibility. It's the bootstrap notion. Can you pick yourself up by your own bootstrap?
Well, how does he know that you're seeming to control your own brain isn't something that your brain is doing?
That one part of your brain is controlling another part of your brain.
Yeah.
Well,
how could he possibly know that?
I'm not sure that he does know that for sure, but he definitely sees that. He is working philosophically with a quantum physicist and about this entire issue. He's someone who studied Buddhist meditation, done Buddhist meditation daily for 20 years. He's Jewish by birth, but he's gotten interested in Kierkegaard and Bonhoeffer, Christianity. And he has really he is a dualist. He believes that there is a spirit that is not reducible to some activity of the brain. Because he says that brain is cause and effect. It's like bumper cars. One thing sets off another. And the fact that you can intervene in your own thought process and interrupt it and decide to do something different from what your own brain is telling you to do indicates that it can't just be the brain. Because the brain would be mechanical. It would be a kind of a conditioned
I still don't see how he
can be sure that it's not
intuition or it's wishful thinking, but I don't know that there isn't some other aspect of your brain that hasn't dictated that too.
Could the brain do this? How would the brain? From where would the brain get a new idea? From where would the brain get a new motivation?
Yeah.
So that's the question, and it's a hotly contested one.
Yeah, I know. It's a big philosophy question.
Yeah.
It's
a big political question.
Can I somehow bring, speaking of analogies like you had in the beginning with the slime mold, can I bring that idea to some discussion of The Sopranos and the relationships between the men and the women on The Sopranos? I was saying that I really can't stand the women on The Sopranos, that the men are obviously monsters and murderers and terrible, but to me it's what the women do that bothers me more, because they deny their responsibility. They deny what they are. They're still there. They're still doing those things. And they're becoming even more misshapen human beings than the men who are the murderers.
Well, it's a sort of classic female cop-out.
Yeah.
I mean, they're enablers, and they're not, and they're getting a free ride, and they're getting a pretty nice life.
And they're blinding themselves.
And they know very well what it's based on.
They know, but they pretend they don't know.
Yeah. But I'm more forgiving of them than you are. I think they're as imperfectly human as the guys are. You know, that's just it takes a more passive form in their case, which is sort of,
right.
you know, which you could feel is less honorable in a funny way. You know, I mean, there's an honor among thieves when you're actually doing these things.
Yeah.
You're at least taking it on yourself. Whereas if you're just sort of getting the benefit of them without doing them and not facing up to that, it's sort of.
Well, it's sort of like if you have if you pay for murder for hire, there's the guy that takes the money and goes out and commits the murder,
mm-hmm.
and then there's the guy who paid for the murder,
mm-hmm.
who's more guilty.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I mean, it's very easy to be the one that sits back and you know, runs things and has things go your way and doesn't have to get your hands dirty, but it seems to me you're still responsible. But I mean, if it were a trial and I were deciding how to sentence these people, I would obviously sentence the guys in The Sopranos heavily, and the women I would probably let off or maybe get for some small thing.
But morally, they're accessories.
But not even morally, but as someone who's just consuming a work of art, who's watching the show, and how I react to the people, I feel a very special revulsion for Carmela, the wife, and Dr. Melfi.
Why Dr. Melfi?
I think there's something just sickening about. There's something about her that really makes me sick. There's the lethargy of just sitting there and talking in that dead voice that she has.
Well, of course, that's therapy.
She is.
That's therapy. Don't react. You know, just be a blank screen.
Yeah, but is that what she's doing? There was some talk on, I think, a couple weeks back on the show. This idea that talk therapy may not be good for the sociopath. You're really just teaching the person you're helping that person sharpen their skills. You're just helping them be a better
rehearse
sociopath.
their act.
Yes. Figure out how to get it by, be normal people.
But I think that was brought up by the Bogdanovich character, who's the therapist's therapist. And I think that Chase was basically saying it doesn't apply here because Tony's not a pure 100% sociopath.
Yeah.
You know, he's got this other side to him, which he turns off whenever it's convenient for him, of course.
Yeah.
Whenever he feels greedy or sexy or whatever, you know, he goes back to psychopath mode. But
well, sociopath. That's what's a sociopath, that he's able to do that. That he's able to. That's why he's not a psychopath.
But he has this other side, which seems like every time he gets into an altered state of consciousness, he accesses flickeringly another reality.
Is he going to become human?
So then the question is, did that set us up for him dying? The fact that he now believes there's something beyond all this.
This isn't a spoiler, we're just speculating. But
it's just speculation, right?
Yeah. Lorraine Bracco, the Dr. Melfi actress, was on Oprah yesterday talking about depression and how she went through a terrible depression. So, I mean, to the extent that she's sitting there acting all flat and depressed, that actually is her own experience as a person. Yeah.
Her sister played the widow of the gay guy. That was her sister.
The widow of the gay
whose name is Lorraine Bracco.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Whatever his name is, the guy who was murdered because he was gay, the gay mobster.
Yeah.
The woman who played his wife is Lorraine Bracco. She's married, or she was married, last I knew, to Aidan Quinn.
Wait, isn't Lorraine Bracco the main actress?
No, I'm confusing them. What's the other one's name? Elizabeth Bracco. Sorry.
Elizabeth Bracco
is Lorraine's sister, younger sister, and she's married, as far as I know, to Aidan Quinn.
Oh, that's nice.
And they have a daughter named Ava. They may have more children by now. They lived in one of the buildings that we had an apartment in New York, and we used to see them sometimes.
But now, the character that I'm most revolted by in The Sopranos is Carmela. I mean, I think she's brilliantly played by Edie Falco, and that Edie Falco has taken this character who is really just like an empty shell of a person and made emptiness seem full, which I think is an amazing thing for an actress to do. It's just astounding. But I really am sickened and feel by Carmela, Tony's wife. Yeah. And I was thinking about how whether I had this idea that maybe there's something about Bill and Hillary that could be that we could see as being like that. Why do people feel so hostile to Hillary? What is it about her when Bill does all of these things? Yeah. It's sort of like Tony and Carmela, Bill and Hillary.
People see her as being like Lady Macbeth. I think they see her as being the more ruthlessly ambitious of the two, the cold one.
Is that just misogyny, that people blame the woman more than the man?
I think they think it's unwomanly. Mm-hmm. And I think people are attracted to someone with some warmth, but particularly they still expect warmth from a woman. You know, some kind of warmth. in that marriage, obviously, Bill is the one with the warmth.
Right.
She's the cold one, and
so,
that...
yeah, when it's flipped around and the cold one is the woman, people feel a sort of a perversion of the natural order or something like that?
They just find it more revolting, that coldness in a woman than in a man.
But in some ways you could say it is the natural
I think they think of a
role.
woman as a mother, and they think of what it would be like to have a mother like that.
But isn't it kind of the traditional woman's role, too, to be the one that doesn't do anything active, who lets the man go out and be the active one, committing the murder, doing her will, and, basically putting ideas in his head, inspiring his ambition. That's Lady Macbeth and Hillary Clinton, and not so much Carmela, maybe.
But now Hillary's going out and doing it herself, so she's also overthrowing that particular aspect
well,
of
that's the
tradition.
problem. You're doing both things now,
That's right.
You've wedged yourself in by using the traditional role of working through a man, and now you're trying to do a second thing, too. You're trying to double up.
Like Bill was her Trojan horse, almost.
Yeah.
I can't see her being president. I can't. And your commenters are saying she will be. I don't think so. I think she's the best thing that could have happened to the Republicans. I really do.
But somebody
has
to be
if you have a terrible marriage, it makes you a weaker person in your public life.
Yeah.
It just has to undermine everything that you do, because you're defended on a front where you ought to be, shored up and supported and defenseless.
Yeah, I think there was some quote of, Laura Bush a while back about how it would be hard for Condoleezza Rice to run for president because she doesn't have a spouse, basically, to provide her with the support. And that, you can't do it without that.
She even sort of came up with a candidate. At the time when there was a lot of talk about her running for president, she sort of acquired a suitable guy.
Well, that's like Al Gore losing weight. If Condoleezza gets married, But I mean, if she really wanted to become president, talk about doing cold, calculating things. If she would, they could just find the perfect person to pair up with her.
Yes.
They don't even need to be in love. It could be just like a completely political alliance.
Well, in New York, we do it for apartments, so, what the hell.
Or people do it for immigration, or, it's a traditional, historically powerful people married for political power.
Right. We can't be we're much too romantic about marriage.
I think that would be maybe, I think maybe there'll be an era when people start doing that again, especially as women, become more politically powerful and wait longer to get married.
Mm-hmm. I wish Condi Rice was running. I'd rather have her be the first female president.
Yeah, they're not even talking about her waiting in the wings anymore.
No.
We hardly even see much of her, actually.
Yeah. That seems to be off the table, at least for now.
Hey, well, so we've gone an hour and 15 minutes, I see, from the little digital readout here. Yeah. So anything else you would like to say?
I'm glad there's a 2-week hiatus on The Sopranos, because I just couldn't take any more.
I'm glad there's a 1-year hiatus on the American Idol, because I was about to...
Yeah, you were kind of ODing.
I have this thing, I'm always writing about it, and it's sort of like, it's getting to be kind of a grueling task. It's sort of just tuning in to look at stuff to, complain about.
Are you still watching Survivor?
Survivor, the series ended.
Oh, it ended.
I love Survivor. I think Survivor is great. Did you watch that?
I watched it the first year, and I was very seduced by it. I thought the production values were wonderful.
The photography is great. It's beautifully edited. Yeah. And the personal relationships are so interesting. And it's such an interesting situation to be in, where people are sort of suffering physically, and then they're trying to win a game that they're kind of inventing for themselves.
It is a perfect little laboratory of human relationships, and it was a great idea. I think it was a brilliant idea, and I think The Apprentice, was a brilliant variation on it, and that Mark Burnett is a kind of television genius. I had a problem with The Survivor, which is that I live with a real one. Yeah. And that made it offensive to me.
Did you ever see the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David? They go, there's like a dinner party, and there's like these two people are going to meet, and they're both survivors, and one is really a Holocaust survivor, and then he's introduced to this other guy, and then he's a survivor, and it's a survivor from the TV show, and so they meet each other, and they cause this whole...
Yeah, that was kind of my problem with it, exactly. I thought, geez, if my husband was in the coal mine in Russia, and they could have flown in a piece of pizza by helicopter, he would have taken it, so... Yeah. But I've been doing a job that involves watching the first season of The Apprentice, and I don't think The Apprentice has ever been as good as that, but I just lapping it up. I'm loving it.
It was really good for a while. Also had very good photography and editing. I mean, I think the production values of these things, that there's a real art. Just like there's a real art to documentary filmmaking. This is going to make me want to drag in my other topic of the week, which I got
knocked off
pilloried for on the web for saying, wouldn't it be better to teach reading to young kids from nonfiction instead of fiction, science and history, great written books for kids, so that they would be learning some additional information and finding out about the world and being inspired to maybe be scientists or whatever. And the backlash that I got from the fiction fans was amazing. People seemed to just assume that nonfiction was just horrible stuff that had no
boring and
no aesthetic value to it, which I just think that's it's absurd to say that.
Literary nonfiction has been a big thing ever since the 60s, and it's one of the great genres.
Yeah, I love literary nonfiction. Well, you've worked on it.
Yeah.
What are your favorite literary nonfiction?
I think I don't like Norman Mailer, but I think The Executioner's Song is one of the most stunning books I ever read. I think it's magnificent. And he keeps himself totally out of it, which is probably why. But I thought that was just mind-blowing. Magnificent.
I wrote a law review article about the death penalty that used a lot of material from The Executioner's Song. It was really, really brilliant.
Yeah. The amazing thing about that book is you look at Gary Gilmore from every possible angle, including his own. And at the end, he's actually dissected, autopsied, taken apart, and the essence of him escapes. The mystery of him just escapes.
And his heart is just a what is that? That's his heart. Although I think Norman Mailer had a whole big theme in that book about how Gary Gilmore was actually such a vital sexual man that to destroy him was a tragedy, because all of these other people, these lawyers and various bureaucrats and so on, they didn't have the real human fire in them, but it was this murderer, who was
descended supposedly from Harry Houdini, or at least claimed that he was. So there was something sort of witchy and
mystical about him.
Well,
we better end now, or the people will say, you said you were going to leave, and then you didn't go. When do you leave? We're like the guest that wouldn't leave. So, should we say goodbye?
For now. Let's say to be continued.
Okay.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Faith.